Hello and welcome again to Earth Magic Brno. And a few weekends ago, Eva and I took a trip. It was extremely cold, snowy weather, and so we actually went to visit a spa in Austria on the first day, and then on the morning of the Sunday we went exploring in the countryside, and from a distance we saw this wonderful castle stuck out on a limestone cliff, and we felt like we must visit. Neither of us were familiar with the castle, but it turned out to be a town or a village called Staatz, S-T-A-A-T. So the castle, known locally as Burg Staatz, seems to have been founded somewhere before 1130. It was built on this cliff with commanding views over the surrounding countryside and was probably considered a strategic location. It was a long and cold climb up the cliff to the top, and the castle occupied seemingly all parts of this hill. You can imagine that it was probably almost considered to be impregnable, but it wasn't. In 1645, after a long siege, the castle fell to the Swedish troops during the 30 Years' War. Having climbed this hill, all I can say is I would not have enjoyed being one of those Swedish troops. It is a very rugged climb and a very comprehensive defensive feature. But the views of the surrounding landscape are absolutely incredible, and we were gifted with a wonderfully bright and crisp day to take in those views and to explore the castle. I did take my dowsing rod and a Type 4 line, or a Type 4 alignment, male and female, does run through the castle. We also found this pitiful little bird's nest filled with snow. A very wintry vision indeed. It took us some time to climb to the top, and there we admired the views, and I pondered how they built such a fortress back in those days. How on earth, in particular, did they build the tower on a sheer cliff? What an engineering feat that had to have been, and what brave people built such a structure. It was a very cold day to be dowsing anything, but I did try to track the line, and we could find the line at the top of the hill and on both sides. In fact, Eva kindly drove around the castle whilst I dowsed. Nothing changed in terms of the way the positive and female lines were situated, so there was no node, as far as we could tell, situated on the castle, just the two lines passing straight on through. From there we did explore an interesting church at the bottom where the two energy lines came into the castle, and we found both lines pretty much either side of this church. One of the lines also passed through this pretty little grotto containing an idol of a female, most likely Mary. From there we decided to head back towards Brno and to cross the reservoir that most of the time is just a very large body of water. And in the middle of this body of water is an island, and on the island is a church, and I'd often seen the church because it's visible from the highway. The highway to Vienna from Brno crosses this lake. And I picked up somewhere that this church was available for weddings, and I don't know where that came from, because when I finally did get to visit the church, crossing this lake, which by now was simply thick ice, I realised in fact it was a complete ruin. And it's a sad story because the reservoir is a man-made reservoir, and an entire village was flooded and lost other than the church on a hill called Mušov. The church itself stands forlornly and, as I say, is in a state of disrepair. Notices said not to enter, everybody did, but I must confess I was a little worried. It's not going to last much longer. Now, the pagan line probably does pass through this church and this village. But unfortunately I left my dowsing rod in the car, although Eva used her natural intuition and said that there was definitely earth energies located here, and the line almost certainly did pass through. I must confess that this walk across the lake and back again in significant cold and blustery conditions really reminded me of how fragile life can be. I can well imagine dying of exposure in such a place with a little bit more time and a few less clothes. Anyway, it was a wonderful weekend. Hope you enjoyed it too.